All right, so assuming you've covered your grounds on whether you need a team or not, we will go and figure out who else needs to be involved from the surrounding areas, my stakeholders. So this is a necessary step that we have to do in project management. A stakeholder is any person or group or entity within or outside the organization that is either affected by your project or can affect it. So decision makers can affect it, and users of whatever it is will be affected. So if we're talking about the move, the people that will be moved are affected. So their opinions or their needs or wants, we need to hear those. And also, there's the decision makers, like the landlord may not accept certain equipment to be in their place, or certain maximum to be exceeded, or certain spaces to be used. Maybe they need to be left alone, or regulators like the fire department or civil defense may have their own requirements as to which common areas need to be left alone for safety reasons, what signages you need to put in case of a fire, like meeting point. And also the size of the elevator needs to be suitable for, I guess, for the usage that it's intended for. Because if you think, for example, hospitals and residential areas don't have the same size elevators, because hospitals need space for, a full bed for emergency purposes. And even electrical outlets are different between, let's say, hospitals and residential. Residential and office also have different needs. So the power, the fuses that they have, the ampage that they have is different. So there are also regulators that have an interest in making sure you're doing things right. I mentioned the landlord and others. So a stakeholder is only a stakeholder if we will engage that stakeholder. We need to identify stakeholders, but not the ones that don't have any participation whatsoever. So CEO sometimes is not a stakeholder. Even though the CEO would order the move, the CEO is not a stakeholder, because we will not necessarily engage that CEO. We will engage someone from the office of the CEO or someone who's representing the CEO. And in that case, the person that we are engaging is the stakeholder, and they will give us any input or feedback that the CEO would have, suggested. So it's very important that we don't put anyone as a stakeholder when in fact we will not be engaging them, because that just fills up our stakeholder register unnecessarily. So stakeholders, some things to add about it. They have different roles or responsibilities on a project. So sometimes their title is different from their role in it. So someone can be an admin in the organization, but their role is maybe a subject matter expert. In the case of a move, I think, I'm going to use a senior admin who's been around for a very long time in the organization to help me with the layout, like who should sit where. That senior admin, he or she will go and inquire with everybody, and it could be also HR. Anyone who's been around long enough to know to talk to the boss and others to understand where they would like to be seated, and that person has to have some sort of control over them to say, no, we're going to place you here, you'll be fine and happy there. The stakeholders can have different objectives with regards to the project. Some maybe getting the rewards of it, the benefits. Some don't want it to happen, so they can be supportive, or sometimes try to ruin that project if they think it's damaging for them. They don't have to be inside the organization or inside your team. They can be external, but it also means they can be internal. Like you yourself on the project, you are a stakeholder. Many people confuse stakeholders and they think they have to be outside of the organization, or that they have to be shareholders, because they call them stockholders. They're not stockholders. It's just somebody who has a stake in it. They have benefit from it, not financial. They have an interest in it. They are involved in it. They are, for example, concerned about it. There's something about the stakeholder that makes them part of it. Okay, that makes them part of this. There's something they get involved in that means that you have to be talking to them, or listening to them, or taking their needs or wants, and so on. All right, so identifying them has its own skill set, but it's really not technical science. But they can be identified in different ways, and we'll look at a couple of techniques. But they could be outside of government offices. Civil defense is a stakeholder. Not that they care about you, but they have a say. They can approve or not approve. the location, public agencies, neighbors, residents. So if you're moving to an office, I think the neighbors who sit in the offices nearby, I think they are going to be stakeholders. But it doesn't mean I'm going to ask them anything, but I need to take them into consideration. And when we identify stakeholders, we identify them in the beginning, but we continue to identify them all through, because they will change all through. Some more will be involved as we go through. You need to make sure you get their buy-in, in the sense that they have to feel that what you're doing is not, going to harm their interest. Any stakeholder that should have been identified, that is, let's say, an influencer, and I don't mean a YouTube or Instagram influencer or TikTok, but anyone who has lots of power, consider civil defense, and you don't identify them as a stakeholder and you don't take their needs into consideration, I can assure you, you'll have problems later on. They will stand in your way and they'll make it tough for you to go through the project. So identify them both inside and outside, determine their requirements, whether they're saying it or not saying it. And that's the tough part. Sometimes they have unstated requirements, meaning they don't really say it, but they kind of expect it from you. So you need to somehow understand that that is expected, understand their expectations, communicate with them throughout, keeping their interest to be positive, and manage their influences. So some are really negative, and they are blocking anything. So let's say you're moving from place to place, the offices, maybe someone lives like next door, and maybe they actually rented a place, maybe a new employee, maybe that joined 3 months before, rented a location close to the office because they just want to walk to the office. And now you're moving to some place that would require a car. I can assure you that person will do their best to convince people that, it's not a good idea. We are in a very good location here. We're used to this place, because they have a personal interest in remaining in that specific location. So, or maybe they have a good office by mistake, they got one with a nice window view that oversees the ocean and, whatever, and they're enjoying it. So if you move them, maybe they will not be happy with that. So, but then you'll have the others who are very interested. So understand who they are, analyze them, and analysis means identify and analyze the mindset, the attitudes, the interests, the expectations, the relationship to the project. And this helps you come up with the best approach, or best strategy to deal with them, whether you want to include them in some of your meetings, whether you should consult them, whether you should spend time explaining why this is really an important project. So it allows you to be more ready for them, to negotiate better, to influence better. Who do you think is your most important stakeholder on a project? I am a stakeholder, and depending on the project, sometimes my family could be a stakeholder in this, but in a hidden format. So I'm not going to put them on my stakeholder register. The client, yes, and you have to also look at the sponsor of the project. Sometimes the sponsor is not the client. So for example, I work in an organization, or like yourself, and your boss will ask you to work on a project, and the project is, let's say, for one of the banks. The bank is interacting with your organization is interacting with you. Your boss, your direct boss, could be the PMO or anybody in there that is, assigning you the project charter. That's your sponsor. All right. The client engages your organization, but your organization is not letting you directly engage and make decisions with the client. Instead, they take the needs and they will pass it on to you, and they will put a different boundary than what the organization and client have. So in terms of money, for example, let's say the bank pays your organization $1 million for a project to set up their payment platform or something because they liked what you have, and you're an IT company. Internally, you're not planning to spend the whole $1 million because you'll have no profit in that case. Internally, maybe you're planning to spend $600,000, and the other $400,000 will be the profit. So internally, you have someone who delegates the responsibility of this project to you, the PM. So the PMO, let's say, or head of IT or head of any department will assign you that project, and you take ownership of it. Internally, your charter says $600,000. To the client, their charter says $1 million because that difference is your company's profit. You're not going to spend the whole money you're charging. Your sponsor is internal to you, it's not the client. You don't consider that bank as your sponsor. You consider your direct line of management who assigned you this one project to be your sponsor. That's who you go to whenever you need to change the time frame or the budget. And if your organization has left a little bit of a buffer for time or money, which they have a buffer for money, that was the profit, the $400,000. But if you need to use more money, you will get the approval internally. If you need more time, you will ask internally, and you cannot go to the bank and say, I need more time. They may not have necessarily delegated this kind of power to you. And so you can't freely go talk to them unless they've told you you can. So your most important stakeholder usually is your sponsor, whether they are inside your organization or they are the bank's, point of contact there. That would be your most important stakeholder. Users and customers typically will not be your most important stakeholders. I know we think, our customers' happiness and our customers make us who we are. Those are usually nice politically, but when companies like Apple roll out their next product, or Samsung does that, they're not really checking with you. They are checking with their own engineers on what's possible. They're looking at market trends. Then they are taking business intelligence of different users, but they do not make the final product, and they do not determine the final set of features based on just the users. Users do not review and approve these things. Their management does. Their finance gets a say in it. Their marketing has a say in it. So a lot of times they are not going to be the users or customers. They tend to fall off to the edges. We take in general ideas of what they are interested in, but we do what we are capable of and what our management approves. So could be shocking to some to think that the customer is the least important. Yeah, in a way they are, because they're not the ones who actually make the product. They help us think about which product to make, but they're not the ones involved in this project. So they don't have a say in it. You can still make the product. It can still be a failure or a success, depending if the clients like it or not. When you're working with a bank to make an IT, a payment platform for them specifically, there's somebody in there that's really, really important, that has a say in what features or functions you will approve or not, or they will approve. So they will be the most important for you. But in your case, because you've been assigned the project internally from your own management, whoever assigned you in the role of sponsor or PMO or something in your organization, or project champion, they become your most important stakeholder. That's who makes decisions for you on any variation in time, money, quality, technical aspects. When you face challenges and you say, we're not able to implement this feature, they're the ones who have to okay it. Now, they may in turn go talk to the bank and get an approval on it, but that may require negotiation and maybe adjustment of contracts or settling of some payments or fees, but they are your sponsor. They internally will become your own sponsor, and they become your most important stakeholder. Hopefully this kind of discussion helps. The stakeholder register will be the key output. Now, PMI, Project Management Institute, doesn't spend a lot of time explaining how you can identify stakeholders, but it does tell you where they could come from, internal, external. It tells you there are different departments. They don't go all out, but there are different techniques that we use. So now you have to do a move. What would be one way, what would be a technique you would use to identify your stakeholders? So how would you find out who your stakeholders are? Do you just stand in the lobby and look around? I'm going to write inside out first. Top to bottom. That's better, because upside down means flipping something upside down. So I'm going to say top to bottom. But let me explain my first part, which is inside out. I would look from the, there's actually something called the onion diagram, in case you're not familiar, because I train people in business analysis. Onion diagram. I'll show you what it looks like. So here's the onion diagram. It is called an onion diagram. Um, Stakeholder onion diagram. It means you have to take your rotten onions and throw it at your stakeholders. So the application team, so think about you, the PM. I would put myself inside, but here they're starting with the application first. Then these are the inside, the core here. The PM, the developer, the business analyst, operator, people who actually work on the application itself, people who would develop it first. And outside the technical team that is involved in this, you have to think about the organization itself. Okay, the direct organization. And there's the department that is involved, and then there's the whole organization. So the department that asked for it. In your case, if you're doing something for inside your organization, there could be a department like marketing who asked you for this business intelligence system or database that you're developing for them. And in that case, I'd say they are the user, right? They are, and they will have their own admins or supporting staff who will be in the marketing department. Then you go outside of that to the whole organization, okay? Here it doesn't show you that. Let me see. It doesn't show you that. It puts them here. I think there are other onion diagrams that will be more clear. So from the technical team to the affected department to the organization as a whole, including the senior management, until you go to this outside layer. So they don't really show you all details here. There's the customer, the suppliers, and so on, banks who lend you money, regulators, consultants, general public. It depends, right? So these are onion diagrams, and onion diagrams just help you look from the inside out. All right. All right. Anyways, so you can go from the inside out. You could also go from the top to the bottom. So I could go to the top of the list. So this is from tech team to customers, all right? And then top to bottom, we go from top management to technical team, all right? So this is another perspective. How else would you do it? How else would you identify your stakeholders? Macro and micro. Micro means fine details, and macro the big picture. So wider view, and maybe others nearby. That's how I'm going to explain it here. So those are immediately around us, and then there's the wider view, general public. So yeah, I can think if you're installing, let's say, a train or metro station somewhere, then you have to think about the community. That's the macro view. And micro could also be your immediate businesses that are impacted or the technical team that is involved. I was thinking something along the lines of, process analysis, which is similar idea of impacted. So who along the process has anything to do with it? So approvers, you can go by roles, decision makers. So who are the regulators? Who the people make decisions on different things? Could be, yeah, I would use mind mapping for sure. Because mind mapping, I can start from the project inside and then branch out and identify the tips of it. The process one is how I usually think, because that's easier for me to cover all of my grounds. All right, see, we're coming up with something really nice here. So branch out from the inside. I could also review org charts. I can review any documentation such as contracts and see who's there. Contracts, I don't know, agreements, which is the same thing. So I could look at these and see if there are people who should be involved. I think we covered a good deal of them. But I would use the basic things of brainstorming as a technique. Why not, right? Brainstorming or workshops with my colleagues, assuming there are brains, right? Then we can brainstorm. I could ask, so I could interview and ask people who know. Sometimes subject matter experts tell you should be talking to this person. Or someone who's been in the organization long enough says, you know, don't do it unless you've checked with this one person. So you may want to check with them. So yeah, so this is good stuff. So these are different ways. Oh, I have a beautiful one here. How about lessons learned? So if we save historical documentation, historical files, I'm going to say. So if we have files from previous projects, then those are going to help us maybe identify people who were involved before in similar type projects, and that tells us we should. Survey, I could use mainly to understand, to analyze, not to identify. Analyze interests, opinions, and so on. And since we're mentioning survey, I'm also thinking risk analysis. This is also to analyze risk from some stakeholders, risk from attitudes or availability, because that would be a problem sometimes if they don't want to make themselves available. From attitudes, availability, interests, or bias. You know, you have to worry about bias. Some are very biased. They want to push you in a specific direction. So, okay, this is actually very good. We should write a book, you know. We are masters of stakeholders. So what we need to do is we use these different techniques that we mentioned. We identify the stakeholders and we track certain pieces of information about them, like the name, position, and company, location, and so on. It's up to you what you want to save, but contact is important, because if you want to communicate later with some of them, you want to be able to reach them. What are the major requirements? Doesn't mean I have every single requirement for them, but what are some of the key things that they would want? What are they expecting out of the project? How much can they influence it? When do they play a role, and so on? So there's lots of information you could save. And you could also categorize them or classify them by internal, external. You know, I don't think I would put on my Excel sheet that somebody is a resistor, because if they see it, then God help me, right? So I'm not going to put that in there, but I will keep in mind. I will keep in mind whether somebody is against my project or not. Maybe I'll use a code instead that they will never really understand, and maybe which department I can put them in there. So the Excel sheet looks like this. Stakeholder name, category, position, role in the project, contact information. I do have one here, and this is exactly the same thing we were looking at, but I do have the lengthy one also that goes a lot more than that. And we can include what phase, we can include, give me a second, let me see here. So here's a bigger, wider stakeholder register. See, I have an ID, and in the ID I can hide a code that tells me I don't like this person, or that I think this person is against me. So a code, you know, let's say I'm making it, the Project Management Institute doesn't teach you this, I'm just telling you this. So I could put, for example, 9675, 0, for example, and the 0 could just mean I don't really like this user. You know, I think this person is trouble. And the other person could be something like 78648, and 8 means they are great. So 8, the last number could represent how much supportive they are of the project, and that would be just internal to me and the team. And the rest could be which department, you know, and that would have a number. Could be a way for you to do that. Or you could put numbers and say, you know, maybe they are in HR and they are number 671. Do you think this person is supportive? What do you think? Since I ended it with a 1, I probably mean that I don't think this person is too supportive of this project. So you could use these codes and nobody would really know why you put them there, just you and your team. But if the secret ever goes out, you're in trouble, you know? Somebody's going to get you for that. But you could use these in case you want to reference them in requirements document and say it came from this stakeholder rather than using names. Let's say you have interconnected Excel sheets, you could do that. So anyways, you don't have to have this. The key ones you really need are the stakeholder name, their role in the project, their contact information, and that's it. Everything else is really up to you. Let me show you what else you could keep. Category, their position in the company, which is different from the role in the project, the time when you have scheduled to meet with them, their contact details, their requirements. This is not the full set of requirements, but sometimes you know that some entities or government agencies, they require some documentation, so you might just put it there. And what actions do you need to satisfy these requirements? This tells you if you need support from some resources in the organization, expectations from the project, strategies for how you want to engage that stakeholder based on what you know about them, who's responsible to collaborate with the stakeholder, and any other notes you want to keep. Right? You could keep a separate tab down here for categories and list them: company, customer, external, vendors, subs, sandwiches. So you keep, and you can keep account actually of how many are in that group, because the bigger the number, the more important that group of stakeholders is going to become. So you could use this for keeping tab of your stakeholders. But that's the bigger one. What you don't see on this is that I did not, for example, this is the cleaned up version of it. I did not put, for example, phase that they're involved in, because you can do that. Because if I have a lengthy project, I cannot be involved with every stakeholder all the time. So I want to know who's more important at which point, right? Who should I be focusing on? So assuming we've used any of the techniques that we've looked at, who would we consider a stakeholder on the MOVE project? Yes, on the charter we have some. Here's the charter again. We have some already. We've identified these people, and I could easily copy these here. So it put them there. Sometimes we don't have the name, but let's say we had the name of the CEO. I'm just going to put the CEO here. Sometimes you have the name, sometimes you have the position. IT. I'm going to pick someone from IT, so someone called Joe S, whoever they are in IT. Security, HR. Let's say HR assistant is helping us with this project. And let's say I'm going to remove these now. So anyways, put their names there. Category, these are all internal. So you could have senior management, for example, senior management, and then you can have regular staff if you want. And you can break them down as you wish. You can put internal, you can put external. So I'm going to say department heads, facilities assistant. Might need to communicate with them. Maybe IT assistant. Okay, movers. Who else? This is a move. Movers are external. So I want this senior admin. It's probably going to help me with the layout. Role in the project, develop layout. All employees. We are affected by move. Customers, and these are external, and they are also affected by move and need to be notified. Interior designer, also develop layout. So admin will get from different people, and interior designer will finalize it. So let's say marketing. Let's keep that internal marketing, but this is for social media announcements. Who's responsible? Marketing is responsible for branding. So you know what? I'm thinking there are two different roles here. There's marketing, and there's our, what do we call them, social media expert, who needs to put it on Facebook. Hey, we have moved to the building. Look at us. We're so perfect. And then marketing. I think they are more about branding. And then, yes, landlord. But who's responsible for safety? Do we have it on the facilities? I think they will have facilities be responsible for safety. Who's also in the building other than the landlord? The neighbors. So the neighbors, because those are definitely going to be affected. Or building personnel. like their own security, their own receptionist. We will have to let them know when we are going in, out. So it also includes their security and everybody in there. So I'm just going to bundle all of these into the building personnel. I don't know that we forgot anyone. See, that's why we think about the techniques here. You have to ask yourself, you have to think. I usually think really well if I think about process. Like in the process of moving, the steps we have to take, and ask myself who will be involved in that step. That's a stakeholder. And then I'm going to go to them and get requirements or conditions and so on. So if we need to get a permit, then I'm thinking, who gives us the permit? Do we need a permit for a move? It's the movers. They will get the permit to move things. So we need the movers. We already have them. Then we have to pack. So the employees, we already have them on the list. And I'm thinking about who makes decisions. So then we have the management. We have like the CEO. We have head of finance, facilities, IT, security, HR. We didn't leave anybody. And then we have all the department heads who will decide on when their teams will be able to help. We have assistant from facilities and assistant from IT. We have the senior admin who will help us with the layout. Interior designer, social media. These are really, really good. Landlord, neighbors, building personnel. We might be okay. I'm not sure if there's anybody else that would be having any say in us being able to move. I can't think of anybody else. This will be the starting point. Mind you, if I was working on this project, would have the name and the contact of the person. You don't see it here. It's hidden, but if I fill out the bigger sheet, I'll put the name, I'll put the contact. See, there's no contact here. It feels like something is wrong. Insert contact. I'm going to say contacts. And here I can put the email, and I could also put the mobile number. I can put their contacts in here. This way, if I need to communicate with them, it's easier, right? Category, position, role in the project. So this role in the project tells me why do I think they are a stakeholder. If I cannot put a role for them here, then they're not really a stakeholder. Procurement, maybe approving and managing movers, I guess, right? So you have to know the connection. Now, I know we put CEO, but I highly doubt CEO is going to be talking to us about the move. CEO will be distant. Maybe CEO, what do we call them? Personal assistant? That's more like it. Because I don't think CEO is going to care. Yeah. So personal assistant from the CEO. That's probably who we will talk to. You have to make sure it's somebody you actually will engage. So even head of finance, you may not necessarily engage that person, but you may engage a finance assistant, for example. I don't know. I thought I put them there. So maybe someone from finance, but not necessarily head of finance. All right. The people you will not engage with, don't put them on the list. All right. And you have to know. So these will coordinate needs of CEO. So you have to know what's their connection in it. I want you to be able to use this form later if you have to use it yourself. The techniques, you need to decide the techniques based on the scenario, based on the project that you're in, based on its complexity, based on whether you have a team or not, or the tools. And then using any of these techniques, you may go and figure out who some of these stakeholders are. The more you fill out details like contacts and so on and what's their role in it and categorize them, the easier it is to manage them. What's the importance of categorizing? Well, if I categorize all and I do a filter, it will allow me to see a whole group, like all of senior management together, all of the external together, all of the customers or contractors together. And that way I can assign these to someone as a strategy to deal with that specific group. So then I would want to create a strategy for, let's say, managing stakeholder. So what is the best strategy that I want to use to manage that specific stakeholder? And this is how we use stakeholder registers. So are we good with stakeholder registers and identifying stakeholders? And can you do it on your own project if you have to?